Chapter 7. Black Wizard Laughing. To Canaloon they came in the early dawn, and in the distance Elric saw a massive army darkening the snow, and he knew it must be the Calmaean host, led by Thaleb Ka'ana and Prince Umbdar, marching against the lonely castle. The bird of gold and silver flapped down in the snow outside the castle's entrance, and Elric dismounted. Then the bird had risen into the air again and was gone. The great gate of Castle Canaloon was closed this time, and he gathered his tattered cloak about his naked torso, and he hammered on the gate with his fists, and he forced a cry from his dry lips. "My Shalla." There was no answer. "My Shalla, I have returned with that which you need." He feared she must have fallen into her enchanted slumber again. He looked towards the south, and the dark tide had rolled a little closer to the castle. "My Shalla." Then he heard a bar being drawn, and the gates groaned open, and there stood Moonglum, his face strained and his eyes full of something of which he could not speak. "Moonglum, how came you here?" "I know not how, Elric." Moonglum stepped aside so that Elric could enter. He replaced the bar. "I lay in my bed last night when a woman came to me. The same woman we saw sleeping here. She said I must go with her, and somehow go I did, but I know not how, Elric." "And where is that woman?" "Well, where we first saw her. She sleeps. I cannot wake her." Elric drew a deep breath and told briefly what he knew of my Shalla and the host that had come against her, Castle Canaloon. "Do you know the contents of the pouch?" Moonglum asked. Elric shook his head and opened the pouch to peer inside. "Seems to be nothing but a pinkish dust. Yet it must be some powerful sorcery if my Shalla believes it can defeat the entire Calmaean host." Moonglum frowned. "Surely my Shalla must work the charm herself, if only she knows what it is." "Aye." "And Thaleb Ka'ana has enchanted her." "Aye." "And now it is too late for Umbdar, whoever he may be. He nears the castle." "Aye." Elric's hand trembled as he drew from his belt the thing he had taken from the demon just before he left the palace of Ashanaloon. "Unless this is the stone that I think that it is." "What is that?" "I know a legend. Some demons possess these stones as hearts." He held it to the light so that the blues and purples and greens writhed. "I have never seen one, but I believe it to be the thing I once sought for Cymmeril when I tried to lift my cousin's charm from her. What I sought but never found was a Nenorian, a stone of magical powers said to be able to waken the dead, or those in a death-like sleep. And that is an Nenorian. It will awaken my Shalla? If anything can, then this will, for I took it from Thaleb Ka'ana's own demon, and that must improve the efficaciousness of the magic. Come." Elric strode through the hall and up the stairs until he came to my Shalla's room, where she lay, as he had seen her before, on the bed hung with draperies, her wall hung with shields and weapons. "Well, now I understand why these arms decorate her chamber," Moonglum said. "According to legend, these are the shields and weapons of all those who loved my Shalla and championed her cause." Elric nodded and said, as if to himself, "Aye, she was ever the enemy of Melniboné, was the Empress of the Dawn." He held the pulsing stone delicately and reached out to place it on her forehead. "It makes no difference," Moonglum said after a moment. "She does not stir. There is a rune, but I remember it not." Elric pressed his fingers to his temples. "I remember it not." Moonglum went to the window. "Now we can ask Thaleb Ka'ana, perhaps," he said ironically. "He'll be here soon enough." And then Moonglum saw that there were tears again in Elric's eyes, and that he had turned away, hoping Moonglum would not see. Moonglum cleared his throat. I have some business below. Call me if you should require my help. He left the room and closed the door, and Elric was alone with the woman who seemed, increasingly, a dreadful phantom from his most frightful dreams. He controlled his feverish mind and tried to discipline it, to remember the crucial runes in the high speech of old Malnibone. Gods, he hissed, help me. But he knew that in this matter, in particular, the Lords of Chaos would not assist him, would hinder him if they could, for Myshala was one of the chief instruments of law upon the earth, had been responsible for driving chaos from the world. He fell to his knees beside her bed, his hands clenched, his face twisting with the effort. And then it came back to him. His head still bent, he stretched out his right hand and touched the pulsing stone, stretched out his left hand and rested it upon Myshala's navel, and he began to chant in an ancient tongue that had been spoken before true men had ever walked the earth. Elric! Moonglum burst into the room, and Elric was wrenched from his trance. Elric, we are invaded. They're advance riders. What? They have broken into the castle, 12 of them. I fought them off and barred the way up to this tower, but they are hacking at the door now. I think they have been sent to destroy Myshala if they could. They were surprised to discover me here. Elric rose and looked carefully down at Myshala. The room was finished and had been repeated almost through again when Moonglum had come in. She did not stir yet. Thaleb Ka'ana worked his sorcery from a distance, Moonglum said, ensuring that Myshala would not resist him. But he did not reckon with us. He and Elric hurried from the room, down the steps to where a door was bulging and splintering beneath the weapons of those behind. Stand back, Moonglum. Elric drew the crooning rune sword, lifted it high and brought it against the door. The door split, and 2 oddly shaped skulls were split with it. The remainder of the attackers fell back with cries of astonishment and horror as the white-faced Reaver fell upon them, his huge sword drinking their souls and singing its strange, undulating song. Down the stairs, Elric pursued them, into the hall where they bunched together and prepared to defend themselves from this demon with his hell-forged blade. Elric laughed. They shuddered, and their weapons trembled in their hands. So you're the mighty Calmaean, Elric sneered. No wonder you needed sorcery to aid you if you are so cowardly. Have you not heard beyond World's Edge of Elric Kinslayer? But the Calmaean plainly did not understand his speech, which was strange enough in itself, for he had spoken in the common tongue known to all men. These people had golden skins and eye sockets that were almost square. Their faces in all seemed crudely carved from rock, all sharp angles and planes, and their armour was not rounded but angular. Elric bared his teeth in a smile, and the Calmaean drew closer together. Then he screamed with dreadful laughter, and Moonglum stepped back and did not look at what took place. The rune sword swung. Heads and limbs were chopped away, blood gouted, souls were taken. The Calmaeans' dead faces bore expressions showing that before their life was drawn from them, they had known the truth of their appalling fate. Stormbringer drank them, for Stormbringer was a thirsty hellsword. And Elric felt his deficient veins swell with even more energy than that which he had taken earlier from Thaleb Ka'ana's demon. The hall shook with Elric's insane mirth, and he strode over the piled corpses and went through the open gateway to where the great host waited, and he shouted a name. Thaleb Ka'ana! Moonglum ran after him, calling for him to stop, but Elric did not heed him. Elric strode on through the snow, his sword dripping a red trail behind him. Under the cold sun, the Calmaean were riding for the castle called Canaloon, and Elric went to meet them. At their head, on slender horses, rode the dark-faced sorcerer of Pantang, dressed in flowing robes. and beside him was the prince of the Calmaean host, Prince Umbdar, in proud armour, bizarre plumes nodding on his helm, a triumphant smile on his strange, angular features. Behind, the host dragged oddly fashioned war gear, which for all its oddness looked powerful, mightier than anything Lormia could rally when the huge army fell upon her. As the lone figure appeared and began to walk away from the walls of Castle Canaloon, Thaleb Ka'ana raised his hand and stopped the host's advance, reining in his own horse and laughing. "Why, it is the Jackal of Malnibone, by all the gods of chaos. He acknowledges his master at last, and comes to deliver himself up to me." Elric came closer, and Thaleb Ka'ana laughed on. "Here, Elric, kneel before me." Elric did not pause, seeming not to hear the Pantangian's words. Prince Umdar's eyes were troubled, and he said something in a strange tongue. Thaleb Ka'ana sniffed and replied in the same language. Still the albino marched through the snow towards the huge host. "By Shadros, Elric, stop!" cried Thaleb Ka'ana, his horse shifting nervously beneath him. "If you have come to bargain, you are a fool. Canaloon and her mistress must fall before Lormia is ours, and Lormia shall be ours. There's no doubting that." Then Elric did stop. He brought up his eyes to burn into those of the sorcerer, and there was a still, cold smile upon his pale lips. Thaleb Ka'ana tried to meet Elric's gaze, but could not. His voice trembled when he next spoke. "You can't defeat the whole Calmaean host." "I have no wish to, sorcerer. Your life is all I desire." The sorcerer's face twitched. "But you shall not have it. Men of Calmaean, take him." He wheeled his horse and rode into the protective ranks of his warriors, calling out his orders in their own tongue. From the castle another figure burst, rushing to join Elric. It was Moonglum of Elwhere, a sword in his either hand. Elric half turned. "Elric, we'll die together." "Stay back, Moonglum." Moonglum hesitated. "Stay back if you love me." Moonglum reluctantly retreated to the castle. The Calmaean horsemen swept in, broad-bladed, straight swords raised, instantly surrounding the albino. They threatened him, hoping that he would lay down his sword and let himself be captured. But Elric smiled. Stormbringer began to sing. Elric grasped the sword in both hands, bent his elbows, then suddenly held the blade straight out before him. He began to whirl like a Tarkashite dancer, round and round, and it was as if the sword dragged him faster and faster while it gouged and gashed and decapitated the Calmaean horsemen. For a moment they fell back, leaving their dead comrades heaped about the albino. But Prince Umbdar, after a hurried conference with Thaleb Ka'ana, urged them upon Elric again, and Elric swung his blade once more. But not so many of the Calmaean perished this time. Armoured body fell against armoured body. Blood mingled with brothers' blood. Horses dragged corpses away with them across the snow, and Elric did not fall. Yet something was happening to him. And then it dawned upon his berserker brain that, for some reason, the blade was sated. The energy still pulsed in its metal, but it transferred nothing to its master, and his own stolen energy was beginning to wane. "Damn you, Stormbringer, give me your power." Swords rained down upon him as he fought and slew and parried and thrust. More power! He was still stronger than normal, and much stronger than any ordinary mortal, but some of the wild anger was leaving him. He felt almost puzzled as more Calmaean came at him. He was beginning to waken from the blood dream. He shook his head and drew deep breaths. His back was aching. "Give me their strength, black sword." He struck at legs and arms and chests and faces, and he was covered from head to foot in the blood of his attackers. But the dead now hampered him worse than the living, for their corpses were everywhere, and he almost lost his footing more than once. What ails you, Runesword? Do you refuse to help me? Will you not fight these beings because, like you, they are of chaos? No, it could not be that. All that had happened was that the sword desired no more vitality, and therefore gave Elric none. He fought on for another hour before his grip on the sword weakened, and a rider, half mad with terror, struck a blow at his head, failed to split it, but stunned him so that he fell upon the bodies of the slain, tried to rise, then was struck again and lost consciousness.